Hello, this is Andrew Wood, and today I'm going to be talking about how to run Mage The Ascension from White Wolf, World of Darkness line. Now, Mage The Ascension is a game that you can play with just one book, and the game will work absolutely fine with just one book as long as you have a good imagination, and you're really going to need a good imagination for this game in particular. Now, this book here is the one you're going to need. This is a revised edition of Mage The Ascension. Here is the Collector's Edition, Revised Mage The Ascension. And here is the second edition, Mage The Ascension. There's also a first edition that is softbound. This book right here is pretty cheap. You probably get it close to $10 shipped. However, there are some pretty substantial improvements between the second edition and the revised. Revised is essentially the third edition of the game, the last edition of the game. The one I would recommend, and you're probably going to be looking at a little over $20, get a copy of the book shipped to you. So pretty close to the $29.95 cover price. You might be able to get it a little bit less than that, but it's not particularly a cheap game, and it does have still a pretty strong following for this game. Now, talking about Mage the Ascension, what you need to understand is this is a world of possibilities. It is, of all games out there, the one that allows you to do essentially everything, because you take place in the real world, in the world of darkness, where real people are. It's just like our world, except a dark reflection. Sort of like that old television show, Tales from the Dark Side. And in the world of darkness, all the same normal things of life are there, but they're a little bit darker. Whites are gray, grays are black, and black's really black, really dark. The shadows and the things that dwell there, the entities just out of sight, and it is our world, and we have that exact same feel, so it gives it a great deal of credibility and believability. However, you're going to have to do your preparation on understanding the city you're running in, and understanding the area you're running in, and understanding the fact that, particularly in Mage, the characters may well go all over the place, so you need to have a well-versed understanding in many different locations and very simple things. You want to buy maps, you want to buy atlases, you want to look online, do some research, download maps, subway maps, bus routes, things like this can actually be very useful in outlining an entire city, and maps of the city in all different sorts, from aerial views to drawn maps with particular locations, are extremely important, and particularly looking into the interest of the characters, where the mages may have their common ground. Now, the game starts off in a wonderful way. You are a normal person that might not be a 100% normal, may have always known his or her entire life that you were special. Now, this person goes through a transformation, perhaps even a transmogrification, depending on the way it is done. And that is called the awakening. That is what you experience when you slough off the mundane shackles of a sleeper. A sleeper is just any other person that doesn't understand the world of darkness. A sleeper is everyone that isn't enlightened, that isn't monstrous, that isn't special in the world of darkness, the mundane consensus. And that consensus dictates reality itself. The game, the first reality itself, as a telerium, as the tapestry, and as a game master, you can use terms like that, because the mage, with their magic, takes and bends and twists that tapestry, and when they fray it, when they damage that tapestry smacks them right back and puts them in their place with its own form of torment known as paradox. And paradox is when you attempt to use your magic to twist the universe too much, and too much might be less than you thought. You must make your magic agree with the way that the sleepers perceive reality. And that is what the war is between the different factions, between the technocracy and the traditions, between the Nefandi and the Marauders. And these groups want to fight a war for reality, for the predication of how people believe, for the control of media, for the control of vehicles, to influence the sleepers' direction to what they consider possible and acceptable. And in this game, the technocracy are vastly ahead in this race, controlling so much, and that is why we have science, which at one point was lumped in with magic, as seen as acceptable, and religion and magic are slowly becoming lumped together and pushed to the wayside in a world that no longer has time or interest in such antiquated ideas. Still, the mages fight on for this war of reality for an attempt to demonstrate what is possible to others, to slowly fight against that tide, so that their paradigm, and the game is all about paradigms. A paradigm means your worldview, and expressing that worldview. And one of the big problems that traditions have is they are so splintered on their worldview. So as a game master, that's a great tool to use against them. You have the political ideas of this person who is just awoken and has a mentor, a wizard, in a Chantry house, and the house might look like a normal house, might look like a skyscraper apartment. It might be on the edge of a graveyard or out in the woods. It could be a abandoned subway shaft or an old castle, an antique-looking wizard's tower, or an abandoned crack house. The choice is yours to where the Chantry is, and the reason the Chantries are in a place is because of something called nodes. Nodes are also known as cairns in Werewolf the Apocalypse. They are exactly the same thing. They are essentially large points on ley lines. Ley lines are the magical energy of the earth, and when those rivers, the ley line is a river, when they pool up into large lakes, those lakes are nodes or cairns. Now, werewolves believe that they have the right to all of these, so right off the bat, you have problems when werewolves come around looking and saying, "This is ours." Well, you go, "Well, no, this is ours," and the werewolves, "We're going to attempt to kill you because you are an abomination unto Gaia, to them." So you have a great situation, a great problem there. Mage makes for wonderful crossover stories. The game that of the World of Darkness line that lends best to crossover stories is definitely Mage, because they have reasons for working against and with vampires, werewolves, wraiths, changelings, hunters, whatever you want to bring in. You can figure out a way to put it with Mage. A lot of the other types do not play well together, do not work well in a game for a storyteller. However, you can bring these things in much more seamlessly and without that sort of hokey stigma attached to them. You can do that pretty well with Mage the Ascension. Now, I'm not saying bring, 30 different things in there and have the Okole Lasama abomination. That's just going to be silly anywhere. But one or two different things in a campaign of mages can be just the icing on the cake if used and done correctly, done properly. Now, I've also said you really have a world of possibilities. You can pursue the game from almost every single level. You should have politics within this game, because in the Chantry, you always are going to have even the slightest, smallest things people will fight the hardest for. Position, title, rank, authority. People want these things. They want you to respect their authority. And as you work your way up through the perhaps even miasma of the Chantry, because remember, while these people have to watch your back to a degree, they also might put the knife in it just as quickly. They aren't necessarily your friends. They may be your housemates, because you all are invested in protecting this node. That's generally what a Chantry is. There are squatter Chantries that do not have nodes, but they are bitch ass. And generally of not that much quality. And again, you can play in a squatter Chantry, but you're going to be in the position of ridicule, mockery from other mages, and to be cast aside and considered of no or little value, to be used and abused by them, because again, without toys, no one really wants to come to your house and play. The mages have a large number of different tools at their disposal here. They have something called quintessence. Quintessence is magical energy. Now, quintessence pools up into something called Taz. Now, Taz is something, and to Hammered, not Taz, for he's a jobber, but Taz, with two S's, is something that can take a great many different forms depending on the energy. It could be rings of mushrooms or the bark of a tree, the moss on a tree. It could appear as bones, or really anything that you want to put the flavor in. It is essentially what the magical energy collects into. Now, there's only so much of it, and that can fuel your quintessence pool. You want to have your quintessence pool fueled, and you can also pull energy right up from the node. Now, this allows you to do complicated rituals to help against your paradox, to feed your familiar. In fact, you may have to have access to one to have a familiar at all. However, a node might only give you a little bit of energy. Now, this is a wonderful tool as a game master. Give them a Chantry and give them a really small node. Okay, you have the small node. Now you have the problem of other things, perhaps, fairly weaker groups of werewolves or whatever trying to come and take it from you. There's a problem you have. Other mages are coming in trying to take it from you. The technocracy might even notice it, but only on a small level. It may simply be a wondrous place that attracts other supernaturals. So you have a reason that other things might kind of show up on your doorstep or be snooping around in your backyard. It makes sense. They are attracted by that same mystical, magical energy you are, but they don't quite necessarily know because they don't have Prime 1 to identify and locate these sort of places like mages do. So mages can quite easily find quintessence pools. Now, if you have 5 mages, and all of them want that one dot of quintessence that your node can generate for you this week, guess what happens? It's called very vicious backstabbing politics, and this is a reason, where they're trying to get the power play so they can get to things, and someone may be the odd man out, or there might be 2 people, and then they might come together and band and try to come up with this sort of almost lion-like pack mentality, where people are vying for dominance, and it presents a great, wonderful element. Do not miss that as a game master. That really will help make the game pop with the internal struggle, with the fact you have to be bonded against the outside world, and just when they're about to kind of come unfrayed as a Chantry, bring the outside element in, bring them back bonded as they're looking at each other. Can I turn my back on you to face the enemy? But maybe you just have to, and you weather that storm. The morale is boosted. But slowly, again, things start to deteriorate. And then you have double agents, other Chantries in the city and the politics between them, particularly if they are more aligned with a certain paradigm. But there's all the more reason they might not want to bring a mage in that's too powerful, or that's too weak, or that, they have reasons to be suspicious of. There are 9 different traditions, and there are mages that don't fall into a tradition. Some of them are called hollow ones. But many of them are simply just orphans, and they are often looked at with derision and scorn, as are hollow ones to a large degree, and rightfully so. They haven't drawn a line in the sand. They haven't made that commitment. They haven't been accepted. Perhaps they just don't have enough worth to be of interest. Perhaps they've screwed up their magic from an early start without a mentor so badly that their paradigm is so out of whack and out of kilter with any real magical tradition that they're just going to have to wade through mediocrity. However, those stories can still be very interesting to tell. Now, the 9 traditions, they have their own policies, they have their own worldviews. However, within those worldviews, there are many, 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 many multifaceted shards. One of the great reasons that the traditions have lost, are losing, will lose, is because they have so many different viewpoints. The 9 traditions, they are so, at many times, completely different from each other. In fact, you could completely knock the technocracy and the Fondi, the Marauders, out of the game entirely if you didn't want any of that stuff in the games. They just don't exist. The traditions would do a good enough job of fighting against each other in the war of ascension, in the war for control of reality, because they just do not agree, and that puts them at often points against each other. However, there can tend to be loyalty and pride in one's tradition, and that can, again, bring that bond together. And the game really has a lot to do. It's like a rubber band, it gets pulled to that breaking point, but then you snap it back together, and it's still there, and it snaps onto something else, and it has to be in a position where you're in this political field of this sort of political minefield. You have your tradition, you have your Chantry, you have friendships, but can you really ever trust anyone besides yourself? And you have to be selfish. You have to be drawing and trying to get the best you can out of your situation. And then you have the other politics, having to deal with vampires in the city, or werewolves that are coming up to deal with your carrot or node. And you might be able to talk your way out of certain things, to avoid wars, and so forth. And that kind of tension, there's always a level of tension with Mage, which is absolutely wonderful. Again, remember, things can just show up in your backyard because they're drawn to that same node that you have. I strongly recommend, for a first-time game master of Mage, give your players a small Chantry with a house that's just a little too cramped. Give them a node that's just a little too small. If you give them a giant node and a giant house, what they're going to start doing is trying to pull in as many NPCs as possible. And that can get daunting, that can get overwhelming. Running several mage NPCs, particularly into high mechanic situations like combat can be incredibly taxing on a game master. I'm going to get to explaining more into that a little bit later. Now, with the war for reality, with the war for ascension, with the war for control of the Telerium, it largely breaks down with the winning of the technocracy. And the technocracy paradigm is televisions, spaceships, Terminator robots, and all the sort of sci-fantasy, hard science fiction that could possibly be seen as coming together. And if I say sci-fantasy, that actually probably isn't right. More along the lines of your hard science fiction that may be possible, could be possible. When you look at Star Trek, the original show, and you look at what we have now, and you go, oh, we kind of have a lot of that stuff, don't we? And that's what the technocracy is all about, creating a show like Star Trek to put that in people's minds, so when those children grow up, they go, that is possible. And, oh, look who provides it for you. The technocracy, and that's exactly the way the technocracy works, and that's the way they win. They've captivated the minds of the sleepers, and the minds of the sleepers are the most powerful tool because they control what is possible, what is permissible, and what is not permissible. You will be smacked down with paradox for attempting. The spheres allow you. There are 9 magical spheres, and they each allow you. Well, they run on a scale of 1 to 6. And 1 is essentially just your perception, just a few minor things you can do with them. The higher they get, the more powerful they get. A starting character right out of the book can have spheres up to 3. If this is the first time you're running Mage, do not let your players take spheres of 3. And do not go, I can handle this. Do not do that. Less is more. Start them off with what you can definitely handle and build up. Hell, if you need to start them all off with just ranks with just 1 dot in a sphere, that's a fine way to do it too, and just slowly build it up. And you'll learn more. You'll become more comfortable with the magic system. You'll become more apt at doing it. I would recommend maybe letting them have 2 dots, 2 spheres at 1 dot each, and 1 sphere at 2 dots each. Yes, that's less than the book says. I would start them back a little bit before that. If it is your first time running, several spheres at 2 dots, you can do some pretty impressive things. And as a game master, you don't want to go, oh gosh, I don't know, that's a bad look for you. However, the more comfortable you become, the more sessions you run, the more comfortable they become from having to learn how to piece and put these together and have to scrape by with a smaller amount is definitely better. And then, as everyone becomes more comfortable, more spheres to the players. There's absolutely no reason not to do that. Now, the players might go, oh, these cool effects. But level 3 spheres can be extraordinarily problematic, particularly when combined with other level 2 or other level 3 spheres. You can really do some major effects that as a new game master, you might not be ready for. Like, okay, well, here, bring the technocracy in, we're going to do this deal. I teleport to the other side of the world. What? I teleport to the other side of the world. Oh, I step into the Umbra. I go in another dimension. Can my... I'm not sure. Creates a big problem for you because there are a lot of really major stuff. If you look at a Dungeons & Dragons level, you're looking at 5th level spells, the characters can pull off like that right out of the bat. They can gate, they can plane shift, they can teleport right off as a base character. You can, with a base spheres in here, begin to actually rip, say, a Werewolf's Cairn. You can begin to rip a Werewolf's Cairn apart and siphon the quintessence out of it from the other side of the world. You can do that. Now, there are some issues with something called paradox. Paradox is violating what the sleepers believe. Now, it gets really complicated, and I'm going to say don't really bother reading into the rules too much because there gets to be some very gray lines in there that can be very problematic. Here's sort of the easy, hard, fast rule to do it. If someone believes that's possible, it'll work fine. They say they believe it's possible, and deep down they don't. They're like, that's really bullshit. Not going to work. If they're a sleeper. Now, you're going to have a great more deal of latitude if you're dealing with vampires and werewolves. It's certainly more dealing with other traditions, even if they don't have the same paradigm, because deep down they know. Now, if the book presents a lot of difficult and problematic examples. For example, for my saying, if you step into the closet of your house and teleport to the other side of the world, that might get you paradox. However, it might not. If no one realizes that there's, that you're there. However, if you had just been on television in a live feed in New York and someone's watching that feed in Paris and you come walking through the street and they're just in their house and look out and look at you and look at them, they look at you, see the same clothes and everything, paradox. However, if you go on the sly, if you move easily, you can probably avoid that sort of thing. Now, mages have something called an avatar. That is their soul. That is what allows them to do magic. It's almost sort of like a second soul that makes them special. Mages are special. They are the best of humanity, plain and simple. They can control the tapestry. They can do this. So as a game master, you can have that avatar talking to them. You can have scenes where you pull them away and the avatar is here and they are there and they talk to each other. It's just it. It's the intuition. It's the old self. It's the journey along this wheel of reincarnation, and that's very much real in Mage the Ascension. And the spirit, the avatar, is talking to them in a scene outside. Using dream sequences is a great deal in Mage the Ascension. Now, one of the most difficult problems is spheres. There are 9 of them, and they don't work like, say, in Dungeons & Dragons you have a list of spells. There are some rotes, there are some of those, but you can do anything you want with them if you have, it's basically kind of like having like 9 colors. You can mix them and match them and mix a little bit of this one with a whole lot of this one and a tiny bit of this one, and you have this color that's just a little bit different than the color anyone else has come up with in art class that day. And you can paint a little bit differently. There's also all kinds of different brushes and different canvases that you can paint on. What I'm saying is it's a toolkit. There are a lot of problems with it. It is nowhere near rules tight. It's extremely rules loose, and this can drive some people nuts to the point that they cannot run or even play Mage. And it's going to really vary from game master to game master because it is not precise. You need to kind of come up with a reason why, okay, you need this, this, and this. And players will all the time try, I'm going to do this. Sorry, man, you don't have matter 1. You just can't do that. That will not work. You do not have the power to do that. Oh. It's, just kind of the way that is. You have to have certain spheres to handle certain situations. You need to know at each level what the spheres do. And thinking about it, be fair, but be firm. Don't allow them to get away with everything because the magic they have is quite powerful. Now, again, they will get paradox. And paradox is on a wheel, and the more of it you get, it starts eating away your magical essence, your quintessence. And if you get too much, you will go into quiet, which could mean anything from you cease to exist to you cease to ever have existed. The other mages will look weird for a second. And, yeah, they've forgotten Bob the Mage because Bob the Mage no longer exists at all. Now, it could simply also just be your character goes into a coma, or just weird, strange things start happening around you, and you can use these odd things, these hobgoblins that come in and play and pull at the edge of your eyes, and think about it almost like a really bad drug experience, a slight trip of paradox. It scared the fuck out of the players from where they're thinking, ooh, mages should be deathly afraid of paradox. It's something that can unravel you from having ever existed. That is some serious shit. Don't pull at the tapestries of the universe too much, or the universe will pull at the tapestries of you. Guess who gets to win? It's the universe. And that's one of the really interesting safe checks in Mage. So I definitely recommend using paradox, but I recommend not being too iron-fisted with it. Otherwise, the game can really lose a lot of its mystery. Now, you have Umbra realms, so we're right in our own world, right? And all of a sudden, we can open up a door and go into a world, into the Umbra. The Umbra is a spiritual reflection of this world. However, the further you get away from it, to the high Umbra, to the astral, you can go through there through your astral projections, leaving your body, or solidly through using spirit, and bring others with you. You can go into the realms of werewolves. You can go into realms that look like, a Dungeons and Dragons world, playing in something like a Conan-esque world of Pangeo or something like that, where you're battling savage monsters because you need to get something for a foci. A foci are like your material components for your spells. You need to get a saber-toothed cat's tooth. You need to get the scales of a dinosaur. These things can be found in the Umbra. You might go off into a world that's extraordinarily futuristic, high-tech, Matrix-like. All of these worlds are out there. Every sort of world you can think of is out there because it is thoughts and ideas encapsulated into these realities, and you can interact with them. And you can come up with reasons why the players need to go into a certain world. To have, for maybe 10 weeks, you're running, all of a sudden it's Cyberpunk you're running. Same characters, and it's believable, and it comes back. And then you go back to the Chantry, and there's the backbite of the Chantry politics. Then you go off, and you have a fantasy sort of adventure, as the characters are going all over to assemble pieces of something to acquire things they need to track someone down. You know, you can go into worlds that are essentially cartoons. You know, and you can run something almost like a Who Framed Roger Rabbit deal, where the characters themselves can become cartoon-like in an astral world. All of these things are possible. That is essentially what I'm trying to say. It's anything that you can imagine in the Umbra could be there, could happen. So it can be any sort of game in addition to a gritty, dark, politic-driven, Chantry-based game where you have to fight for your very survival, fight for your very worldview, and fight against reality by trying to use the strength of your soul to tweak away at it. You have to be very careful. So it works on so many wonderful levels. And when Mage The Ascension is done right, it is a wonderful game. It's definitely a home run of a game. You know, the character is also something called Arete, which is the measure of their soul, the strength of their being. Again, I would not recommend you starting your characters with an Arete more of 2. The higher your Arete is, the higher your spheres. The game is written to have you not start with more than 3. If it's the first time you're running a game, don't let them start with more than 2. Maybe even just 1 is definitely fine. Remember, start with less. You can handle less, and you can't, once it's out of the box, you know, you can't put it back in. But you can always keep pulling out of the box. You know, that's quite easily done. Let me take a look at my notes here, see if there's anything else I need to go over. Mages have a kind of sleeper. Well, a kind of person that aren't really sleepers anymore. They're called custodes. They believe. You could be the cult leader of a faction, and you have a bunch of people who truly believe in you. Now, they can give you power. They can help you work against the Telerium because they believe in you. If you have 25 people there believing in you, following your cult, everything you say is true. You are God to them. Well, all of a sudden, the universe listens a bit more. Because you have more voices saying, yes, 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 this is true, this is right, this is correct. And it can create quite an interesting way. So there's ways you can start working with people, and you can start attracting and pulling people in and conditioning them. And you can build that sleeper into a custom. It takes time, it takes resources, it takes energy, but it is absolutely possible. So that's another way that you can interact and build and take essentially just people off the street and start integrating them. Every NPC you bring in doesn't have to be another mage or a vampire or something powerful. It can be just a simple person. You know, the guy digging graves at the cemetery, or you know, a 15-year-old teenager who really thinks the gothic lifestyle is amazingly awesome, and it becomes receptive to what the Hollow One is telling him, and begins to fall into that cult and building up a cult. You know, it can be a very legitimate thing for a mage character to do. And it might not be a cult in that sort of simple way. Your character might be a rock star who promotes himself as the new Messiah, and people begin to believe it. You know, like John Lennon said, the Beatles were bigger than Jesus, and your character, who's a rock star, might begin to say the same sorts of things, and people might begin to believe him and see the miracles and witness the strange things that the guy does on stage and performing in front of people, and he starts risking and boring up against that paradox. But the more people that believe him, the further away that barrier sleeps. However, there's always that trouble of falling off the tightrope when you're walking in front of a crowd. Yeah. So what you need to know as a game master is this is an extremely hard game to run. Start it off low, start them off. I would recommend starting them off as sleepers, going through the prelude, going through the awakening. Have them make a sleeper. Have them build a very intricate and detailed character. This is a game this is not a game for power gamers that want to simply play by the dots. Make a real fucking person, and then experience him through the eyes of the game master, through the eyes of the other players, through the collective mental space that you share, and experience the politics, experience the relationships. Look for love. Look for all of the things that this person wants, because once you start learning you are better than everyone else, that pride meter really starts running up, and you want the things that you want. And damn it, if Mage is about anything, it's about imposing your will on the universe.